Absent from the war-scarred hellscape of Neater, you are instead surrounded by the azure placiditude of the designer mode, lulled by the soothing thrum of custom jet engines, and of course, the dulcet tones of my voice. The jacketed shells of the white flares and green death rays of the lightning hoods are relegated to the realm of bad dreams from which you wake up sweating. I have two things planned for us today. The first is to improve on some of my vehicles that have been featured in the campaign, and the other is to expand through the neutral territory left behind after the fall of the white flares and lightning hoods. Let us begin. Here is the Beetle. It showed up in one battle where it started at 87% health because I forgot to finish building it. We're never going to make it look terribly pretty, but I'm going to remove some of the uglier features like these things jutting out from beneath the mantlets and maybe improve the corners from the wood a little bit. But the main feature that we're going to be improving today is the fact that this cannot reverse, and it would function much better against some enemies if it could reverse. In addition, its rudder is completely exposed, so we should give that at least a little bit of protection from flak. And there we have it. I have finished the changes that I'm going to make to the Beetle. The transition here is a little bit better than it used to be. It doesn't have the ridges under its mantlets. It has the ability to reverse, and I left the rudder alone because sealing it off made this massive protrusion off the back that looked really bad. At a 20,000 resource vehicle, I'm just going to have to learn to live with it. Here we have the other Dandelion. At some point I'm going to give it a real name, but I haven't figured out exactly what that'll be yet. This showed up briefly in the campaign, and I don't have any serious issues with it that I'm going to fix at the moment, but I'm going to clean up the interior of the airspace because it's walkable, but there's junk visible in it. It's not that clean looking. And in particular, once you get to the back, it's just not finished. So I'll do some work on this and I will be right back. And there we have it. I still haven't painted this craft yet. I'll probably do it in the same color scheme as the skate at some point, but I'm currently undecided. If I go into my little captain seat here, I can go through a long series of bulkheads. This one, fortunately, I can walk through. It's poor door placement, but Rambot can walk through doors, so that is perfectly fine. And if I just go through these one at a time, eventually I can go all the way aft. Those poles are because the AI compartment is on the other side. Please don't shoot that. And then we can look out the aft as well. Can't walk up this though. Here we are back in Neater. I'm just quickly going to go and capture as much neutral territory as I can before any of my allies or other players do so. And I'm not immediately going to go and kill the Deepwater Guard. I'm going to prioritize these resource nodes and just fighting off the Deepwater Guard attack vessels that come in. I will fast forward to the point where I have done all of those captures. Now, I've captured a significant amount of the territory around me and put harvesters on a lot of these resource zones. However, I'm about to have a territory conflict with the Steel Striders because they seem to be under the mistaken belief that they can just go and take this resource zone that I pried from the White Flare's cold, dead hands. This is not okay, so I am not giving up this resource zone. This says I have 115 seconds or be prepared for war. Well, let's bring it, Steel Striders. I will stare at this countdown all day if I have to. And they just walk off my land like nothing ever happens. They don't think of the ramifications of trespassing on my territory. Secret emergency council meeting in which they declared war against you. Steel Striders allied with Deepwater Guard, war with Onyx Watch player. I wonder if the Onyx Watch got picked up just now because of my alliance with the Onyx Watch for the other war that I was in. That's interesting. Well, I suppose we have to go and kill the Allegiance now. Oh, it moved my units away from their territory. I'm not on this resource zone anymore.
Receiving. Moving now.
And we get to do one of these bogus fights where we just kill a blueprint. Now we can stare at it intensely until it disintegrates. Alright. Any second now. I still don't know why this is a thing, and that the battle doesn't end as soon as I'm in engagement distance.
Listening. Moving out.
Of course, now we're going to have to deal with their ships actually attacking me, which means that I need to actually put defensive fleets up there, which is something that I was not intending on doing.
Moving out.
I was never planning on using the Raw to fight the Deepwater Guard because it would massacre them a little bit too badly.
Listening.
So
Moving out.
I'll use it just for defense against the Steel Striders while I deal with the Deepwater Guard.
Listening.
And send some slightly cheaper ships down to fight the Deepwater Guard instead. Here we have a battle where the Allegiance is coming in to fight my resource zone. So I'm going to take the 2 defense craft that I have here and go and fight the Allegiance. Now, one of these we have already seen. The other is one of the first interceptors that I've built, so it's not terribly interesting. And I hadn't fielded it yet, but since it uses lasers, I had built one in case I had to fight the Steel Striders because it shoots down their really small jets more effectively than my other interceptors. Now we'll get into the battle and make sure that we're not going to run aground with the skate before we have a chance to do anything. Now, the Steel Striders vehicles always look fantastic. This one's a little bit too small to get any real detail to it. Still looks pretty good. This point just has missiles left. I did have a little APS gun earlier. Looks like so far so good on not running aground. We'll be fine until we come back around to the sandbar again, I think. Unless my craft decides to turn around and go right for it. Well, we can pull also. We don't really have to worry about that right now. Looks like we might wind up with a few more vehicles intercepting us soon, but nothing horribly big coming yet. Here we are for another fight, defending our attack on the same tile. We are going to be fighting the Iron Maiden this time around. I was hoping to avoid fighting too many more enemies in this small area.
Listening.
This time I'm going to set a waypoint so that we're less likely to run aground.
You're in control. Moving now.
This time around we're fighting the Iron Maiden, which is a reasonable bit bigger. These APS turrets could probably leave a pretty good dent if they manage to hit us. Has a fair amount of missile firepower, but those are probably torpedoes, so our chances of taking damage from them are reasonably small. Looks like it can't exactly decide what it wants to shoot at. Oh, never mind. Never mind. Incoming missile fire. Didn't deal appreciable damage, though. I set the skate a little bit close, so some of its missiles are having trouble engaging properly, it looks like. But I don't trust it. If I leave it to do whatever it wants to with all of this landmass there. It's probably fine now, though. Let's take a look at the health of the Iron Maiden. 94%. There is a lot of metal to this thing. Its guns aren't doing as well as they were earlier, though. The skate does have a tendency to cripple things like that with all of the EMP and the HESH coming in. So the firepower is noticeably reduced now with some of the missile systems and APS offline. The Locust flying around has racked up a reasonable amount of laser damage, but it doesn't strip vital systems the same way that the skate does. It's more focused for very lightly armored interceptors that the Steel Striders at least used to harass you with quite badly. Looks like an internal explosion from one of these turrets that has now popped. We are no longer taking appreciable fire, so now we're just waiting to pop all of the turrets and ammo compartments until this thing finally despawns. Iron Maiden still at 81%, just a tremendous chunk of metal. The armor cost at 50% can make it take quite a while to finally kill with small craft. So we'll just have to keep bombarding it until it finally falls. Alternatively, there's a chance we could kill the AI, but it looks like we're not really dealing EMP damage anymore. So we've taken out all of the components that are susceptible to EMP that our EMP can route to. I'm not sure why our EMP is not able to do anything else, though, that it can't conduct to any remaining vital components. Because I didn't think you could fully insulate with wood or stone or that sort of thing. So I'd expect that it would still be doing damage to the AI. The steam engines seem to have finally gone down, so the propellers back here not turning anymore. There are basically no active components on this vehicle anymore. Which is a common trait with a lot of the Steel Striders vehicles, because they tend to be a little bit on the heavily armored side, like the Rhea. They do have some lightly armored vehicles like the Thresher Shark. Some of the other shark-like vehicles can be a little bit lighter in the armor. But they're usually pretty heavily armored, and the failure point on heavily armored vehicles, at least built like this, tends to be when all of the barrels get snipped and enough of the drive components stop working that it can't work anymore. The missiles haven't been hitting consistently enough to stack their full damage numbers. They keep resetting, but I imagine this has taken a fantastic amount of damage over the fight. It's really sponged rather well. So my Rambot repair tentacle has almost finished. There we go, we're back up to full health. Hey, the detection mast and did a little bit more EMP damage, so there are still a few EMP vulnerable things up there. Has to just be about despawning now. 65%. Still floating though. And there we go. Finally despawning. My people need me. Let's return to capturing. Now our capture has progressed all the way up to 36%, and we have the third fleet coming in to stop us. So let's go and engage the Shadowcat. Very cheap. I don't remember what it looks like. I don't imagine that this will take too long because we outcost it so severely. Assuming that we can, in fact, shoot at it. Looks like a small gunship helicopter. Lots of little barrels. That's my vehicle that's showing up in the stats. There we go. Very lightly armored. Still not a huge amount of firepower, but I'm guessing that's just because the shells and missiles don't have a high firepower ratio. This thing is incredibly explosive, though. Just blew up into a million pieces. That reset our capture, unfortunately, so we're going to start all over again. Well, it's been a few more seconds, and we are now surrounded by enemies again. So let's get right back into battle. Now, as far as I'm aware, these squadrons are new. I've not been in battle with them before. This time, we're fairly severely outnumbered. I pulled in one more locust to help us out. Hopefully we'll be fine. The locusts are fairly tanky and can take out the light flyers pretty well. As long as their targeting is not terrible, we'll be okay. However, this is a lot of flyers. Few hits on the retribution coming in. The active radar missiles will definitely go for this. Otherwise, I don't know exactly what the skate will prioritize. Looks like it's going for the retribution. We're getting a few missile hits, but it looks like most of our damage is currently coming in from lasers. This battle is going to get very spread out.
Receiving. You're in control.
I'm going to try to bunch things up a little bit more that way. Looks like we have a splashdown here. I imagine this will trigger scuttle settings, but you never really know. I should let this go back to auto to maintain range with its target now. Going out of control. So far the locusts have not been taking fire, so it's really just been the skate taking a little bit of damage. A few hits to the rear from missiles because of its speed, didn't quite get to the engines, and a few into the tail blocks, taking more incoming missile fire now. Nice explosion there. Some AI dead craft. Mostly hard to keep track of what we're fighting. There can't be very much left. That's why you need lasers. And battle finished. Unfortunately, I missed most of it, but that was very hard to keep track of. And we've got one more arriving here. Just in time. Let's do a one-on-one. Very cool little helicopter. These things are always so hard to justify building because they lose critical flight components so easily. But I always love how they look. And I've built a few tilt rotor style vehicles in the past, but never really finished any of them because their combat capabilities just weren't quite there.
Receiving. You're in control. Moving now.
Still hanging on there. It must have some fraction of always up set on these rotors to keep it airborne, because it should just be spiraling down into the ocean right now.
Receiving. Moving now.
See a little shield above it at some angles, or I guess below it. Only above it because of the direction it's tilted to. Those look like some good hits. The rotors have stopped spinning, and now it's splashing down with some dark text on it that I can't really read.
Receiving. Taking command. Receiving. Moving now.
Alright, let's get back in that capture zone. The time until next council meeting has been reset due to me going to war with the Steel Striders. I don't know how at war this will make us. It used to be that you could just kind of take a little bit of territory from someone without becoming public enemy number one. I really doubt that's an option anymore. I think that they're just going to throw a lot of resources at me now. Looks like there's a pile of smaller ships that have been made and a few submarines. So I'm going to have to build something with torpedoes. So that'll be my next order of business. I've spawned in my torpedo bomber. Still a little bit of a work in progress, so it doesn't have flares, it just relies on range and long-range torpedoes to fight. It's a little bit on the expensive side, at about 140,000 materials, and moderately armored, at least for me, for a jet at about 20%. Has a big bomb bay in the bottom that opens up during combat, and it will drop bombs out while it circles at a long range, or torpedoes rather, that'll then home in on the enemies. I was planning on spawning in a displacement ship, but it's not armed with torpedoes, so I need to build this instead. It looks like the Steel Striders are back. They have a Spiral Squadron coming in. It did decide just to turn around, which right before getting to me, which is understandable but not acceptable. This time, I am leaving one unit out of combat so that I won't lose capture progress when it moves out of the circle. And let's shoot down some little planes. So the detection system isn't perfect, so not every shot is going to score a hit. It's hard to get amazing detection on a small vehicle. The detection's still okay, so it can hit small craft like these with at least some reliability at range. I guess they must have realized at some point that just one or two of these small planes wasn't terribly scary, but the whole squadron of them doesn't really have much of a difference. It's basically you can hit them or you can't. And there we have it. I have expanded my territory to where I wanted it. I will soon have these last two resource zones inside my actual territory. I have reclaimed this resource zone from the Steel Striders, who mistakenly thought it was theirs. I do have one last little skirmish with them now, with the torpedo bomber that I brought up, which will eventually fight the Cyclone if it actually keeps coming down. But for now, I'm going to engage that and an interceptor with these two enemy craft, the Argonaut and a Falcon squadron.
Listening. Engaging now. Listening.
Looks like the targets are good.
Listening.
We have not capsized. It's an issue with this bomber because of how... There goes a nice beautiful torpedo. Because of how the spin blocks spawn in at the wrong angle, despite my best efforts. We're taking some light, simple cannon fire from the Argonaut right now. And the Falcons may be chasing my bomber as well instead of engaging my interceptors. So it has taken a small amount of fire. Our torpedo fleet is now coming in, dealing massive EMP damage. The medium ones are packed entirely with EMP. The large ones are frag. So we've only knocked off 1% hit points. But hopefully the EMP is doing a reasonable amount of damage to important objects. Unfortunate hits to the bow, which is usually just empty metal. It looks like their interceptors have been taken care of, so ours is now opening fire against the Argonaut. I saw no traces of EMP damage there. That was all thump that it just took. I may have to rearm my EMP torpedoes mid-battle because they don't seem to be functioning anymore. Yeah, they're just dealing thump damage. That's really unfortunate. I like explosions. Let's make them high explosive for now. Actually, unless EMP gets changed again, I'm going to save that over the vehicle so I don't use EMP torpedoes anymore because those seem completely ineffective now. There have been EMP changes on the beta branch, and I have not tested this vehicle on the beta branch yet. The EMP torpedoes worked fine beforehand, well, except for the occasional misses apparently. Now it's down to 89%. We're actually dealing some damage now that our torpedoes are actually harming the enemy. I may have to stagger them a little bit more now that the explosions can knock them away from each other. Have some decent damage, but there's a lot of metal underwater here with the Argonaut. Definitely better to shoot this one above deck and deal some damage to the turrets. Another light smattering of damage across the hull. Those look important. I don't see the mainframe though, so I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing for the Argonaut. And there it goes. I can't read the black text, like always. It successfully reset my capture progress. Well, I got to the natural stopping point for tonight. Our territory has been expanded. We can now potentially maintain stable borders with the Steel Striders and the Deepwater Guard, because I want to stall out the campaign a little bit to push the time closer to the next council meeting. I'm interested to see what the Onyx Watch will do. I'm interested to see what will happen at the next council meeting. So I don't want to do too much damage before then, but I will still slowly encroach on the Deepwater Guard and the Steel Striders. I'll just do it more slowly than my previous offensives. I will likely focus on taking the Golden Trench fairly quickly, because I saw it first. Future Bungalow Bill here with the outro. If you've made it this far, you've either enjoyed watching or have a masochistic streak. I've been using a new mic this episode, which provides much higher fidelity, but also picks up my keyboard. I'll try some improvements in the future to see if I can cut the noise, but suggestions are welcome in the comments. I like to drop previews of what is to come, so here I have one of my few water displacement vehicles that I intend to field in the coming episode. Overall, I like it quite a bit other than the turret caps and intrusive detection, both things I'd like to clean up at the beginning of the next episode. If you were triggered by the asymmetry in the Dandelion, I was too, once I noticed it while editing. That's all for this episode. I hope to see you again soon.